Listening, fill in the blanks.
Let's start.
An audio tape recording does not solve all the linguist's problems. However, speech is often unclear and ambiguous. Where possible, therefore, the recording has to be supplemented by the observer's written comments on the nonverbal behavior of the participants, and about the context in general. A facial expression, for example, can dramatically alter the meaning of what is said. Video recordings avoid these problems to a large extent, but even they have limitations. The camera cannot be everywhere, and transcriptions always benefit from any additional commentary provided by an observer.
Psychologists have long held that a person's character cannot undergo a transformation in any meaningful way, and that the key traits of personality are determined at a very young age. However, researchers have begun looking more closely at ways we can change. Positive psychologists have identified 24 qualities we admire, such as loyalty and kindness, and are studying them to find out why they come so naturally to some people. What they're discovering is that many of these qualities amount to habitual behavior that determines the way we respond to the world. The good news is that all this can be learned. Some qualities are less challenging to develop than others, optimism being one of them. However, some corpora attempt to cover the language as a whole, taking extracts from many kinds of text. Others are extremely selective, providing a collection of material that deals only with a particular linguistic feature. The size of the corpus depends on practical factors, such as the time available to collect, process and store the data. It can take up to several hours to provide an accurate transcription of a few minutes of speech. Sometimes a small sample of data will be enough to decide a linguistic hypothesis. By contrast, corpora in major research projects can total millions of words. Our perception of the Arctic region is that its distance from industrial centers keeps it pristine and clear from the impact of pollution. However, through a process known as transboundary pollution, the Arctic is the recipient of contaminants whose sources are thousands of miles away. Large quantities of pollutants pour into our atmosphere, as well as our lakes, rivers, and oceans on a daily basis. In the last 20 years, scientists have detected an increasing variety of toxic contaminants in the north, including pesticides from agriculture, chemicals and heavy metals from industry, and even radioactive fallout from Chernobyl.
Pollutants respect no borders. Transboundary pollution is the movement of contaminants across political borders, whether by air, rivers, or ocean currents. The 8 circumpolar nations, led by the Finnish Initiative of 1989, established the Arctic Environmental Protection Strategy, EPS, in which participants have agreed to develop an Arctic monitoring and assessment program, AMAP. AMAP establishes an international scientific network to monitor the current condition of the Arctic with respect to specific contaminants. This monitoring program is extremely important because it will give a scientific basis for understanding the scope of the problem.
Certainly, any prospective time travelers may have to overcome more physical and logical hurdles than merely overtaking the speed of light. One such problem, posited by René Barjavel in his 1943 text, Le Voyageur Imprudent, is the so-called grandfather paradox. Barjavel theorized that, if it were possible to go back in time, a time traveler could potentially kill his own grandfather. If this were to happen, however, the time traveler himself would not be born, which is already known to be true. In other words, there is a paradox in circumventing an already known future. Time travel is able to facilitate past actions that mean time travel itself cannot occur.
We know from research that the reading circuit is not given to human beings through a genetic blueprint like vision or language. It needs an environment to develop further. It will adapt to that environment's requirements, from different writing systems to the characteristics of whatever medium is used. If the dominant medium advantages processes that are fast, multitask-oriented and well-suited for large volumes of information, like the current digital medium, so will the reading circuit. As UCLA psychologist Patricia Greenfield writes, the result is that less attention and time will be allocated to slower, time-demanding deep reading processes.
Towards the end of the 20th century, the government realized that, due to limits on both the size of the country's workforce and its land area, its labor-intensive industries were becoming increasingly uncompetitive. So an economic committee was established which concluded that Singapore should focus on developing as a service center and seek to attract company headquarters to serve Southeast Asia and develop tourism, banking, and offshore activities. The land required for this service sector orientation had been acquired in the early 1970s, when the government realized that it lacked the banking infrastructure for a modern economy.
In that moment, Rita and Jake stumbled across an interesting set of differences between older and younger minds. Popular psychology says that as people age, their brains slow down. The implication, of course, is that elderly men and women are not as mentally agile as middle-aged adults or even teenagers. However, although certain brain functions such as perception and reaction time do indeed take longer, that slowing down does not necessarily undermine mental sharpness. Indeed, evidence shows that older people are just as mentally fit as younger people, because their brains compensate for some kinds of declines in creative ways that young minds do not exploit. Excellence does not emerge without appropriate help. To reach an exceptionally high standard in any area, very able children need the means to learn, which includes material to work with and focused challenging tuition and the encouragement to follow their dream. There appears to be a qualitative difference in the way the intellectually highly able think, compared with more average ability or older pupils, for whom external regulation by the teacher often compensates for lack of internal regulation. To be at their most effective in their self-regulation, all children can be helped to identify their own ways of learning, metacognition, which will include strategies of planning, monitoring, evaluation, and choice of what to learn.
Like, share, subscribe the channel, and press the bell icon for further updates.